The neighborhood of Willow Creek prided itself on being picturesque. Trimmed hedges, uniform mailboxes, and perfectly painted shutters gave the illusion of order and harmony. But beneath that surface, tension often simmered, especially under the watchful eye of the new HOA president, Linda Graves. Linda was the type of woman who saw rules not as guidelines, but as gospel. To her, a single lawn ornament out of alignment was a personal insult. She strutted through block parties and HOA meetings like a self-crowned queen, clipboard in hand, ready to correct anyone who dared step out of line. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, she spotted something she considered unacceptable. Across the street, Jameson Wright, a retired Army sergeant in his late 60s, was sitting on his porch, sipping coffee and greeting passers-by. His gray beard framed a warm smile, and on his head rested his most cherished possession, a faded camouflage army cap, frayed at the edges but worn with pride. To Jameson, the cap wasn't just fabric. It was 20 years of service, countless nights away from home, and the memory of brothers in arms who never made it back. It was his badge of honor. But Linda didn't see it that way. She stormed across the street, heels clicking like gunfire against the pavement. "Mr. Wright," she said sharply, her voice dripping with disdain, "we need to talk about that hat." Jameson looked up, adjusting his glasses. "This hat?" he asked, tapping the brim with a finger. "Yes, that hat," she snapped. "It's inappropriate for community events. We're trying to maintain a certain image here at Willow Creek, and that camouflage doesn't exactly fit in." Neighbors walking their dogs slowed down. A jogger stopped, earbuds dangling. The confrontation was drawing an audience. Jameson leaned back in his chair, unfazed. "Ma'am, I've worn this cap longer than you've lived in this neighborhood. It's not a fashion statement. It's a piece of my life." Linda's lips tightened. "Be that as it may, as HOA president, I have the authority to enforce community standards. People are talking, and frankly, it looks sloppy. We don't want Willow Creek looking like some rundown neighborhood, do we?" The words landed like daggers. Sloppy, run down, as if his service, his sacrifice, were nothing more than an eyesore. Gasps rippled through the small crowd forming on the sidewalk. One woman whispered to her husband, "She didn't just say that, did she?" Jameson's jaw tightened. His calm demeanor masked the sting, but his eyes flickered with the weight of humiliation. He had faced enemy fire, slept in deserts and jungles, carried wounded comrades to safety, and here he was being lectured about a hat. "I wore this cap in Fallujah," he said quietly, his voice steady but firm. "I buried friends who never got to come home. You're telling me it's not welcome on my own porch." For a moment, even Linda faltered, but pride stiffened her spine. "Rules are rules," she said, her tone harsher now, as though doubling down would erase her misstep. "If you want to honor your service, do it in private. This community doesn't need constant reminders of war and uniforms." The crowd murmured louder. A teenager muttered, "Man, she's crossing the line." Another neighbor shook his head in disbelief. Jameson stood slowly, his posture straightening like the soldier he once was, though age had bent his shoulders. In that moment, he carried himself with the dignity of a man who had given everything for his country. "You may be president of this HOA, Ms. Graves," he said evenly, "but you're not the president of me. This hat stays." Linda's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, someone clapped from the sidewalk, then another, and another. Within seconds, the sound of applause filled the cul-de-sac. Linda turned, startled, as neighbors she thought were her allies now applauded the very man she was trying to humiliate. Jameson didn't bask in the moment. He simply sat back down, took a sip of his coffee, and adjusted his cap. But inside, he knew this wasn't over. HOA presidents like Linda never backed down after being embarrassed. If anything, this was just the beginning. And in Willow Creek, everyone could feel that the battle lines had been drawn. The days following the confrontation were unusually tense in Willow Creek. What had started as a single exchange on Jameson Wright's porch quickly turned into the neighborhood's favorite talking point. At first, it was whispered conversations at mailboxes and driveways. But soon it spilled into the open, dividing the once quiet community into two camps. Those who sided with Linda's rigid interpretation of rules, and those who believed Jameson had every right to wear his cap. Linda, still seething from being publicly humiliated, wasted no time in escalating the matter. At the next HOA meeting, held in the clubhouse just down the street, she introduced what she called community presentation standards. It was a draft amendment to the HOA bylaws that banned military or work-related attire at all community gatherings. This is not about one person, she insisted, tapping her pen against her clipboard for emphasis. This is about maintaining harmony and aesthetic standards. We can't have people making personal statements that disrupt the look of our neighborhood. Everyone in the room knew who she was talking about. Jameson sat in the back row, quiet and composed, his cap perched proudly on his head. The sight of it in that moment was enough to make Linda's jaw clench. As Linda spoke, a murmur spread through the room. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, exchanging uneasy glances. Finally, Mr. Ramirez, a father of 3 and longtime resident, stood up. With all due respect, Linda, he said firmly, that cap isn't disrupting anything. It's a reminder that this man fought for our freedom. Freedom that includes the right to wear what he pleases. Applause broke out, but Linda quickly banged her gavel. Order, she snapped. This is not about disrespecting Mr. Wright's service. It's about consistency. If we allow one exception, then where do we stop? What if someone wants to wear offensive slogans next? The argument rang hollow, and the crowd knew it. One neighbor muttered, a veteran's cap isn't the same as a hate slogan. Jameson remained silent, though his presence spoke louder than words. His quiet dignity seemed to highlight the absurdity of Linda's crusade. The meeting spiraled into chaos. Some defended Linda, parroting her claims about standards and property values. Others passionately defended Jameson, pointing out that without people like him, there wouldn't even be a Willow Creek to argue about. The turning point came when young Emily Henderson, a teenager whose father was currently deployed overseas, stood up with tears in her eyes. My dad wears a cap just like that when he's home, she said softly, her voice trembling, and I miss him every single day. Mr. Wright's hat doesn't make this neighborhood look bad. It makes me feel safe. It makes me remember that my dad is out there fighting so people like you, Ms. Graves, can sit here and complain about hats. The room fell silent. Even Linda's closest allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jameson's eyes softened as he looked at Emily, giving her a small nod. But Linda, unwilling to let go, doubled down. This is exactly what I mean. Emotional displays cloud judgment. This community is about rules, not feelings. If we allow sentimentality to govern us, we'll have chaos. Her words backfired instantly. What she thought was a show of strength only revealed her coldness. By the end of the meeting, Linda had failed to push her amendment through. Too many people were against it now, emboldened by Emily's words and Jameson's quiet example. Still, Linda was not the type to accept defeat gracefully. After the meeting, she cornered Jameson outside in the parking lot. You may have won this round, she hissed, her voice low so others couldn't hear. But I'm not done. That hat of yours will come off, one way or another. Jameson met her glare with calm resolve. You can write all the rules you want, Ms. Graves, he said evenly, but respect can't be legislated. Either you have it, or you don't. Linda turned on her heel and stormed off, her heels clattering against the pavement like warning shots. The battle was far from over, and now the whole neighborhood was watching. Over the next few weeks, Willow Creek felt less like a suburban neighborhood and more like a battleground. The clash between Linda and Jameson had grown into something larger than either of them imagined. Neighbors who once waved at each other during morning jogs now crossed the street to avoid confrontation. Front lawns that used to showcase holiday decorations and cheerful yard signs began sprouting something new, quiet but deliberate displays of loyalty. On Jameson's side, several households began flying American flags outside their homes. Some veterans in the area dug their old service caps out of closets and started wearing them proudly during evening walks. Kids even began sketching little flags and chalk on the sidewalks in front of the house. On Linda's side, a handful of loyal HOA board members began posting notices about proper attire at community gatherings and leaving passive-aggressive reminders about bylaws tucked under neighbors' doors. They even started whisper campaigns, suggesting that Jameson was difficult and disrespectful of authority. But every attempt to paint Jameson as the problem only seemed to backfire. The man never raised his voice, never responded with anger, and never broke the rules. He just kept wearing his cap, mowing his lawn, greeting his neighbors with a polite nod. His calmness made Linda look more and more unreasonable. The situation finally came to a head at the annual Willow Creek Summer Barbecue, a neighborhood tradition where families gathered at the clubhouse lawn for food, games, and music. Everyone wondered if Jameson would show up, and if Linda would seize the moment to make another scene. Sure enough, Jameson arrived that afternoon wearing his cap, carrying a homemade peach cobbler he had baked for the dessert table. He set it down gently and went to sit under a shady tree, quietly observing the festivities. Linda spotted him almost immediately, her lips pressed into a thin line as she marched across the grass, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Wright," she called loudly, making sure the whole crowd could hear. "We've discussed this. That hat is not appropriate for community events. I'm asking you once again to remove it." The chatter and laughter of the barbecue faded as heads turned toward the confrontation. Jameson stood slowly, his expression calm but resolute. "This cap," he said, his voice steady, "isn't just cloth and thread. It represents brothers and sisters who never came home. It represents the country we all live in. If that offends you, Ms. Graves, then maybe the problem isn't the hat." A hush fell over the crowd. Even the children stopped their games to listen. Linda, flustered by the attention, snapped back, "This is not about patriotism. This is about rules and order. If we let one man defy the standards, what kind of example does that set for everyone else?" From a crowd, Mr. Ramirez shouted, "The kind of example that teaches respect for sacrifice." Others chimed in, clapping and cheering. Emily, the teenager whose father was deployed, walked up and stood beside Jameson. She looked Linda directly in the eye. "He's not breaking the community," she said firmly. "You are." That was the moment the tide fully turned. Neighbors rallied around Jameson, some literally forming a protective circle around him. The cheers drowned out Linda's protests as people began chanting, "Leave him be! Leave him be!" Overwhelmed, Linda's face turned crimson. She tried to regain control, but her voice was swallowed by the crowd. In that instant, her authority as HOA president began to crumble. Jameson, still composed, raised a hand for silence. "Folks," he said, "this isn't about me. It's about standing up for what's right without losing who we are. We don't need to fight each other. We need to remember we're neighbors first." His words struck a chord. The crowd quieted, some nodding, others even wiping tears. But for Linda, it was the ultimate humiliation. She stormed off, leaving her clipboard on the table, the barbecue continuing without her. The community had chosen its side. And Jameson, without ever raising his voice or breaking a single rule, had won something far greater than an argument. He had won the respect and loyalty of his neighbors. In the days following the barbecue, Willow Creek was buzzing. Word of the confrontation spread beyond the neighborhood. Some residents posted about it online, praising Jameson for his dignity and strength. Others criticized Linda's behavior, calling it petty and disrespectful to veterans. The HOA board, sensing the backlash, convened an emergency meeting. For years, Linda had run the association with an iron fist, but now her grip was slipping. Several members openly questioned whether her leadership reflected the values of the community. Petitions began circulating, calling for her resignation. Meanwhile, Jameson continued living quietly, never bragging or rubbing his victory in anyone's face. He simply maintained his yard, helped his neighbors when asked, and kept wearing his cap without apology. To him, it wasn't about winning. It was about not backing down from something that mattered. The turning point came 2 weeks later, when a group of veterans from nearby towns, many of whom had heard about the incident, drove into Willow Creek. They arrived in uniform, walking shoulder to shoulder as they approached Jameson's home. Their presence was silent but powerful, a reminder that his service and theirs deserved honor, not ridicule. Neighbors came out to watch as the veteran stood with Jameson in his driveway, saluting him in respect. Emily and her mother brought out fresh lemonade for everyone. Some residents clapped, others cried. For the first time in weeks, the community felt united. Faced with overwhelming public support for Jameson, Linda could no longer hold her position. At the next HOA meeting, she resigned in anger, muttering about ungrateful neighbors. Her departure was met not with hostility, but with relief. In her place, the community elected a new president, a soft-spoken neighbor named Mrs. Patel, who promised to bring compassion and fairness back into the HOA. Her first act? Officially recognizing community service as a point of pride rather than a disruption. From then on, veterans in Willow Creek were celebrated, not silenced. As for Jameson, he remained humble. When neighbors thanked him for standing strong, he simply said, "I didn't do this for me. I did it for everyone who can't speak for themselves anymore." That night, as he sat on his porch with the evening breeze tugging at his cap, Jameson finally felt something he hadn't in years: peace. And the rest of Willow Creek had learned an unforgettable lesson. Sometimes the quietest strength speaks the loudest.